The toilets still work, our captain isn't a drunk Italian, and there hasn't been an iceberg in sight. So far, this cruise is going...
Attention passengers, tonight's screening of Going Overboard will begin in 10 minutes on the Sunday.
I take that back. This won't be a good cruise after all. But this is movie night. Hello and welcome to Movie Night, your number one source for film reviews about bad cruise ship movies. I'm your host, Jonathan Paula. Presently, I'm somewhere in the Caribbean Ocean enjoying a cruise with my family, and since I had to record this particular episode a week early, I thought we'd focus on something relevant, like cruise ship related films. So let's begin with Going Overboard. Released in May of 1989, this $200,000 comedy farce is really only notable for being the first feature film to star A-list funny man Adam Sandler. But before he even matured or was a cast player in Saturday Night Live, he starred as a struggling comic on board a cruise ship. After his recent string of uninspired, unfunny cash grabs, it's easy to forget Sandler was once a hilarious comic with some truly great material. Sadly, however, we get almost none of that in this sorry excuse for a film. Instead, he puts on stupid voices, mugs for the camera, and generally acts like an incompetent goof for the majority of the 97-minute film. The supporting cast includes Tom Hodges, Scott LaRose, Billy Zane, and Billy Bob Thornton, none of whom are the slightest bit memorable. The story plods along to the incessant sounds of a steel drum calypso band, cheap muzak, and bland jazz. And the actual presentation style is curiously inconsistent. Sandler himself breaks the fourth wall to introduce us to the story, immediately apologizing for its low budget, and then he schleps the viewer around the boat like we're watching his personal vlog or something. But other sequences are conventionally shot and edited for some reason. I hesitate to guess what director Valerie Breeman was possibly thinking.
Maybe you should avoid telling actual jokes and just stick to improvising and talking with the audience.
I thought it was funny.
Yeah?
A lot funnier than that jerk they hired as the ship's comedian.
You actually thought that joke was funny?
Let me put it this way. He's funny. The other guy's a hack.
Yeah, I am funny. He really is a hack, isn't he?
The lethargic and pointless narrative is worsened by constantly cutting away to Miss Universe confessionals, ridiculous dream sequences, and Burt Young as General Noriega, who is actually watching the film itself on VHS, who defends his honor by shouting at the TV, "We'll see who gets the last laugh, you leftover worthless kangaroo vomit." Besides being awfully paced, the R-rated movie is really quite uncomfortable and awkward. Every scene plays out 3 times longer than it needs to be, almost as if it was deliberately padded so the picture could qualify for feature length. With unrealistic dialogue and empty characters, the film is devoid of conflict and tension, making it a true struggle to actually sit through. It's no surprise that this film presently sits in IMDb's bottom 10 rated movies of all time. It is just so painfully boring, I regretted watching literally every scene. Going Overboard is terrible, not even enjoyable ironically. My score in the Rate-O-Matic, a big fat 1. With no redeeming qualities and nary a single laugh whatsoever, it's a wonder Sandler actually managed to have a successful career after this piece of garbage. Anyway, time for tonight's poll question. What's your ideal cruise destination? Leave your response as a comment below. Next up tonight, Speed 2 Cruise Control. This extremely ill-advised follow-up to the smash action hit from 3 years earlier somehow managed to earn over $50 million in profit when it was released in June of 1997. The PG-13 action thriller stars Sandra Bullock and Jason Patric as a couple taking a Caribbean vacation aboard a luxury ocean liner when it's hijacked by the nefarious Willem Dafoe. Although future Oscar winner Bullock is beautiful, festive, and decently relatable in the lead, even her participation here was obviously a giant misstep, remarking on her being stuck in another violent situation. "I swear I'm never leaving the house again." Patrick, meanwhile, is hokey and uncomfortable every time he's on camera, and is perhaps the least convincing action star in film history, delivering his lines with as much charisma as a wet cardboard box. Dafoe is amusing as the scenery-chewing villain, but for all the wrong reasons. The deranged software designer decides to sabotage the very ship he's riding on for poorly explained, unbelievable reasons. Whereas the original picture was a literal non-stop thrill ride, most of this 121-minute picture takes place on one of the slowest forms of transportation, a leisure cruise, eliciting absolutely zero excitement in the process. Although the script, originally intended to be the third Die Hard picture, was seemingly retailored with Keanu Reeves in mind, he was fortunately smart enough to avoid this terrible project, which stumbles from one ridiculous scene to the next. Everything is far more contrived and goofier too, but the forced humor is never funny. Let's be honest, it takes a considerable amount of effort to make a film about hijackings, murder, explosions, and bombs boring. But the usually competent director Jean de Bont somehow found a way to do just that.
Right, watertight doors are closed. Ballast doors should open any minute. Close it! Close it! Close it! You just told me to open them! Follow me. just like that.
One of the few sequences that works, and actually delivers some tense moments, comes when an alarm is triggered and the tropes of stereotypical passengers are forced to flee the boat. Mark Mancina's mostly reggae score is pretty hammy, and often distracting. However, the visual effects by Industrial Light and Magic are top-notch, bringing to life many of the larger, more impressive action sequences. Although it lasts way too damn long, becoming almost a parody of itself, the final climactic sequence which sees the cruise ship crashing into a St. Martin harbor is nothing short of epic. Eating up nearly 25% of the film's $110 million budget, this climax would set records as the single most expensive stunt ever photographed. But cutting away to the ship's second officer counting down the ship's slowing speed, literally 10 separate times, is a complete joke. Bullock and Dafoe are also completely absent from the final third of the movie, only re-entering the narrative a full 30 minutes later when it's convenient to the story. We're lucky the movie was a critical shipwreck, otherwise we might have been subjected to Speed 3: Escalator Escape. The 1994 original is one of my favorite action movies that I purchased on VHS and DVD, rewatching it often. But this sequel is a regrettable mistake I hope I never have to watch again. Speed 2: Cruise Control. Tensionless drivel, despite fun action. My rating, A2. Falling extremely far from the proverbial tree, this may very well be the most disappointing and poorly conceived theatrical sequel ever produced. While the final crash is certainly worth checking out, the rest of the movie isn't, and I thought it was bad. A quick reminder now to check out the Movie Night Archive channel for my exclusive trailer commentaries and an organized library of all our past reviews. Let's finish up tonight with my review of Boat Trip. This $20 million rom-com was released stateside on March 21st, 2003, and no surprise here, completely failed to make back a profit. Horatio Sanz and Oscar winner Cuba Gooding Jr. star as two dim-witted, hopeless romantics who endeavor to pick up chicks on a singles cruise, but in their infinite stupidity, they manage to get booked on a trip for homosexual men. These two guys are likable enough, and thankfully they're more oblivious than hateful towards their new group of gay friends, and a majority of their performance issues can likely be attributed to the poor script writing. As Sanz deals with his irrational homophobia, Gooding falls in love with Rosalind Sanchez, the ship's female dance instructor, who of course assumes he's gay. What happens from there is nothing short of one hackneyed and bigoted joke after another, as our heroes struggle to make sense of their situation while constantly being hit on by an elderly Roger Moore, playing a flamboyantly gay British passenger, and a role that will totally have you rethink everything you thought you knew about James Bond. Honestly, hearing him flirtatiously ask during breakfast, "Would you like a bite of my sausage?" is worth the price of admission alone.
You hear that, Jer? All the sex a man could want.
Well, then you must visit the hole-in-one room.
Oh, they have an onboard driving range.
Some of the chaps down there do swing some very large clubs. You two have an open relationship?
Open? What do you mean by open relationship?
I mean, do you date?
Of course we date, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
That's absolutely wonderful. We must get together sometime, go for a midnight swim. Do whatever feels right. That is what a gay cruise is all about.
Depending on how dated your sense of humor is, a scene where Gooding nervously attempts to illustrate his favorite oral sex techniques on a banana will either make you laugh or roll your eyes. The writing struggles to maintain any sense of purpose, wandering between intolerant nonsense and an unoriginal love plot. Occasionally, though, the experience does deliver a few laughs, notably from Sands' loud and boisterous delivery and Bob Gunton as the ship's captain. Leisurely paced, the whimsical score by Robert Folk doesn't help matters much either, and instead, the movie plays out like a bad sitcom. Director Mort Nathan contributes nothing to the PG-13 rated picture beyond the basic shot compositions and visual styles, but at least there's rarely any technical missteps. The 94-minute picture is innocent fun, if occasionally offensive and trite. Nothing I'd be interested in watching again, but it's honestly not that bad. Boat Trip, uninspired amusement that's borderline intolerant. I'll give this a 3 for my final rating. While there's never anything outright bad, boring, or cringeworthy with this picture, it rarely does anything right either. It sort of floats along like one big homophobic joke. I thought it was lame. Finally, tonight let's take a look at some of your tweet critiques. If you see a new movie in theaters, tweet your review at the JPMN hashtag. Next week, when I'm back on dry land, we'll take another look at some summer action films we missed earlier this year. The Lone Ranger starring Johnny Depp, World War Z with Brad Pitt, and Two Guns with Denzel Washington and Mark Wahlberg. Once you've seen these films, share your opinions by voting in the polls below or by leaving a comment review. If you'd like to watch more episodes of Movie Night, check out the related video links to my right, or click subscribe to be notified of all new content. And be sure to follow me on Twitter or Facebook for updates between episodes. Once again, my name is Jonathan Paula. Thank you for watching and listening. Until next time, have a good movie night.